Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Pamela Alexander, and I'm Director of Community Development at Ford Motor Company Fund, which is the philanthropic arm of Ford Motor Company. Ford is thrilled to be here tonight as we celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Tuskegee Airmen and the opening of the Tuskegee Airmen National Museum inside the Charles H. Wright. Ford is a longtime partner of the Tuskegee Airmen, and we are deeply honored to be presenting sponsor of their new museum. As a 100-plus-year-old company, Ford understands the importance of legacy, not just for the sake of history, but to ensure that that history and that legacy continues. And over time, we have been on a wonderful journey with the Airmen. Several years ago, when the Airmen received the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor, Ford held a celebration in Washington, D.C. to recognize this momentous occasion. More recently, Ford funds Our Voices, Our Stories documentary told the stories of the lives of two of our hometown heroes, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart and Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson. And of course, throughout it all, we have supported the museum, including their many youth programs that help to ensure that the legacy of the Airmen continue. Because what better tribute can there be for men who literally changed the world than to see their dreams realized in the knowledge and the experience and the achievements of youth? But you have to know your history to move forward. The Tuskegee Airmen are literally legends, and I know we all think we know their stories. But as someone who learns something new every time I speak with them, I can assure you that there is much to be shared. That is why Ford is so excited about the opening of this museum inside another treasure, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, so that people from all over the world can learn about and celebrate the historic Tuskegee Airmen and the degree to which we all stand on their shoulders. And what better time to do that than 80 years to the day from when the Tuskegee Airmen started? So I want to conclude by thanking the Airmen, those with us today and those who are not, for their service, their inspiration, and their sacrifice for all of us. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the program.
Hello, I'm Kevin Frazier, and welcome to this special celebration honoring a group of men who are true American heroes. The Tuskegee Airmen, the first black pilots in the United States military. You know, it was 80 years ago today that the 99th Pursuit Squadron, the original designation for this grand experiment to train black pilots, truly began. Now, on this important anniversary, we will take you inside the incredible new Tuskegee Airmen National Museum in Detroit. Housed inside the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, the Tuskegee facility will honor the brave and groundbreaking men and women who changed this country's history. You know, during the Second World War, the airmen and their support staff fought not only the Germans in the skies over Southern Europe, but also the racist attitudes of the day in America's segregated army. But the numbers and results, they speak for themselves. More than 1,800 missions, 351 were as escorts for bombers, and they shot down 112 enemy aircraft, including 4 jets. You know, they were expected to fail. Instead, they soared sky high. Let's start tonight by taking a look back at how the Red Tails became aviation legends. September 1st, 1939, Germany bombs Poland, and Hitler's bold action is felt around the world. Days later, the UK and France would declare war. World War II would forever change humanity. As bombs continue to fall, America prepares to fight, soldiers enlisting both black and white. But for the black soldiers, the opportunity to serve their country was curtailed by discriminatory practices in the military. As world leaders worked together in the fight against Hitler, the American civil rights movement was brewing. In 1925, a memo came from the Army War College stating that black soldiers should be restricted to only menial work, no combat. This lasted for decades, excluding black soldiers also from being trained as pilots. As World War II continued, so did the demand for social change in the United States. Black Americans were working in wartime industries and wanted more opportunities and responsibilities. In January of 1941, the NAACP staged a National Defense Day protest throughout the nation against discrimination in the military, specifically against blacks in military aviation. NAACP leaders insisted the black soldiers be given access to non-segregated military units, receive training from white officers, as well as opportunities for non-combat assignments, and that a 10% quota of black soldiers be met. The Army responded by creating the first all-black aviation unit. 400 black soldiers began training with white instructors in Illinois for 22 weeks. After completing basic training, soldiers then moved to Tuskegee for advanced aviation training. By March 22, 1941, the new black pilots were ready, and the U.S. War Department would officially activate the 99th Pursuit Squadron, which was equal to its white aviation units in every way except color. The 99th Pursuit Squadron was a significant victory for black aviation, opening doors for other squadrons. Both men and women were among the first black pilots. These black officers and enlisted soldiers were college educated and received CAA training through the expanded civil pilot training programs set up in black universities. Among those civilian pilot training programs was the 320th College Training Detachment at Tuskegee Institute. These programs offered cadets without a college education access to a 5-month college-level accelerated aviation training program. Graduates of this program were then transferred to Tuskegee Army Airfield to begin pre-flight training. These successful programs produced the cream of the crop. From the day it was established at Tuskegee, they trained 992 pilots and deployed 450 overseas. Pilots executed 1,378 combat missions, 179 bomber escorts, destroyed 112 enemy aircraft in the air, and most importantly, they were known for their record of protection, only losing 25 bombers. Among the airmen, 3 distinguished unit citations were received, at least 1 Silver Star, 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses awarded to 95 airmen, 14 Bronze Stars, 744 Air Medals, and 8 Purple Hearts. Tonight, we celebrate the legacy and the continued work of the Tuskegee Airmen. I'm your host, Kevin Frazier, and thank you so much for joining us for the grand opening of the Tuskegee Airmen National Museum in Detroit. I really do wish we could be there in person, but hopefully we will be very soon. My father attended Tuskegee, so I was familiar with the exploits of the airmen at a very young age, but I do want to tell you about one very special connection I have to this amazing group of heroes. 10 years ago, when I moved into my neighborhood in South LA, one of the first people I met was an older gentleman who lived 2 doors down. His name was L. I called him Al for about a week until he finally corrected me. Well, every day he went on his afternoon walk and he would pause to chat with my son Shane, who was 4 at the time. As Shane got older, they became buddies, and Shane looked forward to seeing him each afternoon. So one day, Elle invited Shane over because he said he had something he wanted to give him. Imagine our surprise when Shane came home with a massive wooden model of the P-51 Mustang that Elle had gotten when he was a Tuskegee Airman. From that day on, Elbert Hudson became one of Shane's heroes. Even now, a decade later, that plane and Elle's picture still sit in Shane's window. Mr. Hudson flew 23 combat missions, escorting bombers in the Mediterranean, Italy, and Southern Europe. And the story doesn't end there. He was CEO of one of the first black-owned banks in LA, was the first African-American president of the LA Police Commission. He led the local NAACP chapter, and until he passed away at the age of 96, he was a living piece of history and will always be a hero to my family. You know, it's always great to meet history face to face, and it's also important that in this case, there's an organization that is keeping the Tuskegee Airmen and their legacy alive. Now, after the desegregation of the U.S. military, there was no need for a segregated aviation unit. So in 1949, the Tuskegee experiment came to an end. With its tremendous success, the Tuskegee Airmen began a new chapter. At a meeting held in a Detroit basement, the pilots of the 332nd had the idea to start an organization to facilitate reunions, resulting in the formation of Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. The airmen began having reunions for the many pilots of the 332nd, but quickly expanded the reunions to all persons that participated in the experience during World War II. After the establishment of Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, chapters began springing up all over the country. Wardell A. Polk, Richard Jennings, and Elmore M. Kennedy, who served together in the 477th Bomber Group, along with a few others, would evolve another innovative idea for an organization with one focus: to commemorate and keep the airmen's legacy alive. This group of forward-thinking airmen, with the support of Detroit Mayor Coleman A. Young, helped establish the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Museum. And now we would love to show you this spectacular space. And for that, let's turn things over to Dr. Brian Smith at the museum.
So I'd like to thank Kevin Frazier for being the host this evening and for the kind introduction. You've heard a little bit about the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. I'd like to take you on a short virtual tour of our fine exhibit here at the Charles H. Wright. So here we start the tour of the Tuskegee Airmen Museum, setting the pace for their race. Some of the first African-American pilots were Eugene Jacques Bullard and Bessie Coleman, as you see pictured here. Bessie Coleman was a manicurist in Chicago, and when she was sponsored to learn how to fly, she had to go all the way to France because no one in America would teach an African-American to fly an airplane. As we progress through time, from slavery through the Civil War, we see that African Americans were willing and ready to fight for their country. So the question is often asked, who are or who were the Tuskegee Airmen? These were patriotic Americans who wanted to fight for their country with the belief that if they fought for their country would begin to respect them as men.
We were firing at radar stations. We'd come down from 15,000 feet, firing at the buildings on the ground. And something said, boom. And I look up and fire came up out of the floor. That sucker hit me square. And the idea flashed in the back of my mind, I've got to get out of this damn thing. When I came out past, as the tail went by, I still see the rivets. As I looked down, I see the damn trees. I said, hell, I'm close. I pulled the ripcord, and the damn parachute came out, and boom, it popped. And when it popped, I swung into the trees. And when it swung into the trees, I hear a voice, Ach so, a heavy German voice. Ach so, yeah. I look down, there's a German soldier. And all of a sudden, he looks at me and watches the little red Second Lieutenant Barr, and he saluted me as an officer. And to this day, I can still see the figure of a German soldier, a salute. How do I feel? Neither scared, thankful, and after thinking about it, I simply did my job.
I was steeped in citizenship and patriotism. And I still remember and still can feel going to class, and the first class in the morning is putting our hand over our heart and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America there. I've always believed in not desegregation and not that bad part of America there, but what it stands for and the concepts and three precepts of the Constitution of the United States. So when I was flying those missions, and whenever we got a mission assignment to go out on the mission there, I felt as though I was, fighting for my country, and my country being everyone who was a citizen of the United States of America. So it was my job, I felt at the time there, even though it was so ironical. Here we are, the fighter group there, flying above the B-17s and B-24s, and our job is to go ahead and protect those bombers and to protect those 10 men in each of those bombers from the interdiction of enemy aircraft. So it was a job. It was a job that I welcomed and wanted to do.
Prominent in the civilian pilot training program was the Coffee School in Chicago, and they taught African Americans how to fly. In fact, this was the only entity that was not connected to a college or university that got the civilian pilot training program. So they were teaching non-degreed African Americans how to fly airplanes, and they could then transition into the Army Air Corps. After the program was started, and that's what we're celebrating, March 22nd, 1941, the unit was activated at Chinook Field in Rantoul, Illinois. Many airmen were shot down. We had about 35 Tuskegee Airmen who were prisoners of war. One of them is still alive. He's depicted in this picture here on Liberation Day.
Ironically, here we are, blacks from the United States, protecting the B-17, B-24s. The whole situation gives me the shivers when I think about it today. But we were very fortunate to survive. I think I was fortunate to survive the POW camp.
Dispelling the myth. There were many myths of the Tuskegee Airmen. The one notable one I'll talk about today is the fact that they never lost a bomber. And I understand how that myth got started. In about 200 missions, they flew 225, they never lost a bomber. But 25 missions, there were about 25 bombers lost. So we can't say they never lost a bomber, but we can say they had the best record of any fighter squadron in World War II before and even after for protecting other aircraft in combat.
Absolutely scared. I'd never bailed out before, not even, in practice. But anyway, I was in a pretty violent thunderstorm there, and there were mountains over that part of Kentucky that had the engine failure, and I decided to ride it down to 6,000 feet, where I decided I would go ahead and jump out. Well, anyway, I jettisoned the canopy and I went out, and as soon as I hit the slipstream there, I was hurtled back into the tail of the plane and broke my leg in two places. I didn't notice it at the time, but I evidently had enough strength at the time to pull my ripcord. The chute opened, and I think that when the harness closed in around me, I must have just temporarily blacked out for a while. But when I came to, I was still in the clouds, and I was looking downward, and I started laughing because I couldn't understand why I had put on one brown sock and the other red sock in the morning there. One of my shoes was missing, and it was missing on the side where the red sock was. And as I started looking closer, I could see beads of blood dropping from my foot there. And of course, I was my first worry then is how do I land this thing without hurting myself any further. I guide myself by pulling the shrouds on the parachute so I could land in the valley there. But when I pulled on the shroud, the air started spilling from my chute, and I started going into a free fall. I let that go and just folded my arms and said, "That's it, let the chute, let what will be, will be." And I drifted towards the side of this mountain, and luckily there was a dead pine tree that I hit, and my weight broke some of the branches, and the parachute bloused over the top of the pine tree there, and when I came to rest, I was about 2 feet above the ground. So it was very easy for me to slip out of my harness and get into the chute. The next thing I started worrying about, it's raining now. How do I get some help? Did anybody see me? Am I going to be lost here without anyone finding me and possibly die of exposure? And after I had got under a shelf of rock on the hillside or mountainside there, I thought I heard a voice saying, hello, hello, and I started screaming back frantically, hello, hello, I'm here, I'm here. And not too long in sight came a fellow by the name of Leif Daniels, and he was on horseback, and he had another horse in trail there, and when he saw me and I saw him, we just sort of stared at each other for a while, and he stared at me because I was the least thing he probably could expect as far as what he presumed I would look like. And I'm wondering, is it safe around this guy? But anyway, he got me up on one of the horses there, and we went back down into the valley and stopped at his cabin. Probably half of the people, or certainly not the kids there, ever seeing a black man before. And then the reception I got and that type of thing. And then the idea is that some 40 years later or 50 years later, I'm invited back to the town. And I'm hosted as the parade marshal in the town there, and it goes on and on and on and on. But anyway.
The 477th Bomber Group was a group of Tuskegee Airmen who flew twin-engine bombers. They never saw combat against the enemy, but they did see combat against racism here in the United States. Their commanders were determined they were not ever going to go to combat, and they interrupted and delayed their training many times. April of 1945, everything came to a head at Freeman Field, Indiana. The base commander thought he would keep segregation alive, so he created an officers' club for the African American officers, and the original officers' club was for the white instructors. He had everyone sign an order saying, I understand there's an officers' club I'm not supposed to go to, and I'm paraphrasing. 104 officers refused to sign that order and were put under house arrest when they attempted to go into the officers' club where the Caucasians were. 2 of them were convicted, and in 1995, all of their records were offered to be expunged by President Clinton. Several of the airmen refused, saying they wanted history to record what happened there at Freeman Field. This was a serious incident, some call it mutiny. During wartime, you can be put before a firing squad for disobeying a direct order. And these men knew that that was a possibility, yet they protested the racism that the Army, or not the Army per se, but these generals were perpetrating on them because of their segregationist ideas. So Thurgood Marshall was their defense attorney, and we know that he fought many civil rights battles and later became the first African American Supreme Court Justice. 477 deserve a great honor, great respect from us, because our civil rights movement, we think, was started and facilitated by this incident at Freeman Field.
You still have to fight the system, learning how to play the game. When we went in, we weren't supposed to be in the first place. Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. The war is going on. they needed us. They needed our background. We had to learn how to play the game. You had to become part of the system. We were part of the system until the war ended. Then they kicked us out. Some guys stayed in, like Harry and a couple of other guys. But it's all learning how to face this vicious, racist system under which we live. It's still going on today. Systemic racism. I think we've made it very clear how to play the game, make progress.
I'd like to focus on an airman that's still alive. His name is Colonel Harry Stewart. Harry Stewart was just a young man, probably 18, 19 years old at the time of this picture. Well, it's actually a painting. You see his airplane, Little Coquette, all around the museum. If the museum raises enough money, we will purchase a P-51 and paint it in the colors and nose art of Harry Stewart. Why Harry Stewart? In this picture, Harry Stewart is about to achieve his third kill in one mission. This picture shows the German aircraft in a 190 D9. That was the most advanced fighter the Germans had besides the jet. It was a more powerful aircraft than the P-51. It had better armament than the P-51. And Harry Stewart should not have survived that dogfight. The dogfight started with the airmen leaving the bombers, going safely home. They went to look for targets of opportunity on the ground. And they came upon two German aircraft landing. As these airplanes were being shot down upon landing, other Germans were perched higher up and started to attack the formation of Tuskegee Airmen. Harry Stewart shot down another one in a dogfight, and when that dogfight was over, he realized he saw tracers going by his cockpit. Realizing a German was on his tail, he went for broke and dove for the ground. As he got close to the ground, he saw a gap between trees, and he angled the airplane between those trees, went into a tight bank. As you see, he's starting to bank the aircraft here. The German tried to follow and tried to put his guns on Harry Stewart. He wasn't able to do that. His airplane went into an accelerated stall and he crashed into the ground. Now, we call that a maneuver kill, and it's a credible kill, and that was Harry Stewart's third kill.
He was making a pursuit curve on me, and he was trying to get deflection on me in order to hit me with his 20 millimeters. I was desperate and trying to get out of his deflection shot there. And I pulled in. I was pretty low to the ground. I pulled in just as tight as I could. I guess I was on the verge of stalling there, but it was at that time, in order for him to get inside of my radius of turn there, evidently he either hit a high-speed stall or lost control of the plane anyway, and he went into the ground. My feelings is, as I said before, I thought sure he had me. It looks like he was, I couldn't shake him, really. And I thought he had me, and I had all of the fear and physical reactions that might take place when you know you've had it, or you get very close to having it.
Harry Stewart is notable, and we're going to look at the trophy that he helped win in 1949. This was after the war was over. This is the coveted trophy of the 1949 gunnery meet that the Tuskegee Airmen won. In 1925, there was a War College study that said African Americans were not smart enough, weren't brave enough, and couldn't handle complex equipment such as a P-51 Mustang. In 1949, after the war was over, the United States Air Force said we need to have some competition to make sure our pilots don't lose their edge. So they created this competition that would cover 6 days in Las Vegas, Nevada, at I believe now at Nellis Air Force Base. The Tuskegee Airmen flew in P-47s, the N model, while the other competitors were flying P-51s and P-81s, which is a twin Mustang. They had inferior aircraft. They competed for 6 days and came out on top. Alva Temple, Harry Stewart, and James Harvey were the 3 participants in the competition, and it's undeniable that they won the competition. This is a replica of that trophy. The trophy was found about 2004 in the basement of the United States Air Force Museum through the diligent research of Zelly Orr. The Air Force Museum allowed us to bring the trophy to Detroit to celebrate its finding. We got the members who were still alive to come to Detroit at that time and touch the trophy for the first time since 1949. So this is a special trophy. It proved that the airmen were the best of the best. They had the best record of escorting bombers. And they were also the best of the 12 squadrons in the continental United States in 1949 in the United States Air Force.
Actually, the meet itself was from May 2nd to May 12th, 1949. General Hoyt Vandenberg was the chief of the Air Force at that time. Just a number of months before then, he decided that he would like to resurrect one of the games that they had in the Army Air Corps prior to World War II. And that was, I think, various names they had for the, it was akin to Top Gun, though. It was having a team of pilots go out, and it was maybe a team of 3 pilots, and compete against one another in the different groups that they had at the time. In the early part of 1949, he asked that all of the 12 Continental fighter groups that were in the country at the time there, that they select 3 pilots to be sent to 3 pilots and 1 alternate to be sent to the environs of Las Vegas Air Force Base, which is now Nellis Air Force Base, but anyway, that they would send this team there to compete in a fighter gunnery meet. And the top team would be given the honors and a loving cup as a result of it. But anyway, these pilots descended on Las Vegas Air Force Base prior to May 2nd, 1949. And after some practice runs and orientation of the desert where we were to go ahead and actually perform, and there were 12 parts to the games that we had there. Aerial gunnery at 10,000 feet, aerial gunnery at 20,000 feet, skip bombing, dive bombing, strafing, and rocketry. The jets that they had at the time there, the F-86s and F-84s, did not have the appurtenances for the rockets, so they actually split the contest into 2 groups. That was the piston aircraft and the jets. and the piston of the jets, of course, did not fire the rockets there, so it wasn't apples to apples as far as the contest was concerned. There were 5 groups, or 5 teams that were with the propeller aircraft. Most of them were P-51s, but there was one group that was a 332nd Fighter Group, which you all probably recognize, but better known among the public is the Tuskegee Airmen, and among some of the pilots who were overseas known as the Red Tails. But anyway, they were in the competition there, and to make a long story short, after 10 furious days of competition there, the winners were announced, and the Red Tails, the Tuskegee Airmen, the 332nd Fighter Group, the 3 pilots from that group there were announced as the winning team of the 1949 fighter gunnery meet for propeller-driven aircraft there. What gave me such a sense of joy and pride as far as that's concerned, you know, there was always the question among the segregated fighter groups that we had at the time there that really were these guys really qualified? Those guys that were called, they weren't called the Tuskegee Airmen at the time, it was the 332nd Fighter Group. Were they really up to par there? And I think that this fighter gunnery contest, akin to Top Gun, showed once and for all that the black pilots were just as good as any of the other pilots in the United States Air Force.
It taught me how to comprehend different aspects of life. I could apply the sciences of aviation and aerodynamics to different sports or different activities you do on a daily basis.
Learning things in this program has definitely helped me in my everyday life, including at school. It's helped me get into advanced math classes and helped me in my physics classes as well.
I like how close everybody is. It's not like a corporate school where everybody's a little more distant, and it feels like family.
Kids as young as 14 years of age can solo in one of our motor gliders. At the age of 16, a student, a young person, can actually solo in a powered airplane, such as a Cessna 172, which the Tuskegee has here as well. And then at the age of 17, they can actually get their pilot's license and fly their family and friends anywhere from 50 to 150, 200 miles, wherever their dreams take them.
This, we feel, is kind of leveling the playing field. The urban areas, the people we call underrepresented in aviation have been overlooked, underestimated for years, and we're trying to change some of that with the programs we do here at Detroit City Airport. That's now my life mission and what I'm dedicated to doing for the rest of my life.
I plan to have a career in aviation, preferably a military pilot, then transfer over to airline, but I like to explore different avenues along the way.
I want to gain my private pilot license and gain the necessary skills to move on to airplane out of glider and move on to gaining my instrument rating.
I have wanted to be a pilot for a very long time, so this has given me the opportunity to do that.
You know, the Tuskegee program has a very positive impact on the community and on the airport as well. There aren't many programs, actually I would say there aren't any programs where a child or a young adult can walk in, demonstrate some basic academic skills, and be motivated to learn about aviation and get rewarded with flight instruction and flight training. There are aviation programs out there around the country, and there are even youth-focused aviation programs. But what's being done here at Tuskegee is a bit different.
So in September of 2019, I soloed in the motor gliders, which means I was able to actually fly it by myself. No one else was in the glider with me. It was a really great experience. It's definitely different than flying with an instructor, just because you're completely responsible for everything that's going on and you have to stay really focused, and it's also a very rewarding opportunity.
I've soloed in January of this year. I've gotten into the top 3 scores on our ground school.
Well, I mean, it's great because it's increased exposure, right? For a long time, we haven't had the opportunity to be exposed to things or to, well, really it's about opportunity and exposure, right? We didn't get those opportunities or the exposure. And so now you have a lot of people who may be looking for something, and it's right here, it's in your backyard. And the more people get involved, the more it's going to grow. And so that's one of the biggest things about the program here. Last year, they didn't have a lot of students. This year, it's double, and hopefully it'll continue to grow.
The museum actually offers free flight training. Now, to most of us, free and flight training, those two words really do not belong in the same sentence. But thanks to Tuskegee Museum, we actually do that.
The biggest joy I've had, aside from getting married and watching the birth of my children, is cutting loose a couple of teenage pilots into the community.
There's definitely something more than sitting home and watching YouTube. There are people out there who want to give you opportunities if only you're brave enough to take them. And I think you should.
Yes, I am very grateful for Dr. Smith and all of the instructors in this program, because without them, there's no way I would have had the opportunity to do this. And I'm so grateful, and they are amazing people.
I'm still trying to do the same thing. Trying to get the young people to get prepared for life.
And as I said, I kept my eye on the prize being is to become an aviator, and eventually things turned out quite well, because I look at the 80 years I'm talking about now, and I look at then and I look at now, and even though to a number of people it feels as though there's been no change whatsoever, things are just as bad as they ever were, I feel a difference in being able to see the beginning 80 years ago and what things are now, and it is different, and they are better regardless of what anyone might say. They're not there, but they're better. Thank you.
You know, the Tuskegee Airmen are still making such a positive impact on inner city youth. Today, pilots still gather, and the museum offers so many opportunities for aviation exposure and advancement. The Aviation Career Education Academy is a program designed to introduce youth to careers in aviation. This 5-day camp is based at Wayne State University and includes tours through commercial, military, and the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Museum. Students actually get to fly an airplane. The Tuskegee Airmen Flight Academy is for youths between the age of 14 and 19 who want to become airline pilots. Students receive year-round flight instruction, which then leads to a private pilot certificate at a minimal cost. The Wild Blue Wonders program inspires middle school students to learn more about STEM, problem-solving strategies, and careers in aviation and aerospace science. The Tuskegee Airmen National Museum Rocket Club seeks to engage students in aerospace science and space travel. The club includes college students and adults that have an interest in high-power rocketry. Now, for more information on the rest of their programs, please visit the website tuskegeemuseum.org. It's such a beautiful space and a fitting tribute to the men and women who were a part of the Tuskegee program. You know, the Tuskegee Airmen National Museum will continue to honor these heroes, but we also need your help. Tonight, you can become a part of this legacy by donating to the museum fund.
I want to thank you again for spending time with us this evening to learn about the Tuskegee Airmen National Museum within the Charles H. Wright Museum. I really want to thank our sponsor, Ford Motor Company Fund, and Pamela Alexander specifically. I also want to thank the Detroit Youth Choir for their special rendition of the Tuskegee Airmen fight song. While we didn't charge you for this evening's attendance, we do ask for donations for the museum, its youth programs, the airplanes that we maintain, the aircraft that we're pulling up from Lake Huron. We have giving levels on our website, and for each level there is a gift. We have the Tuskegee Airmen 80th anniversary coin. We have aircraft that will be signed by Harry Stewart and Alexander Jefferson, as well as Harry Stewart's book, Soaring to Glory. That's a fine story of a Tuskegee Airman's account of World War II. Again, we thank you for your participation. We look forward to seeing you in the future and helping us thrive and survive here in Detroit, teaching young people about aerospace and aviation.
Your donation is so important because it will not only help the Tuskegee Airmen continue these programs, but it will also help continue the rich legacy of this group. Make the decision today to give because there's so much more to come. Thanks for joining us tonight. I want you to enjoy the Detroit Youth Choir's rendition of the Tuskegee Airmen fight song. I'm Kevin Frazier. This has been my honor. Take care.
Contact, joystick back and sailing to the blue. Loyal sons of the 99, brave and tried and true, for we are heroes of the 9. To hell the answer's mine. Fight, 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 fighting 99. Rat-tat, down in flames they go. Withering fire from the 99 sends them down below, for we are heroes of the 9. To hell the answer's mine. Fight, fight, fight.
Fighting for our rights, crazy, grown but some men dreaming in the clouds daily. The 99th ain't another number like it, going down in history, gifted with them down.
Ring spur, only birds in the clouds. Fight, 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 say pride aloud. Damn strong, mentally easy. Another kind of mind like Airman Tuskegee.
Fighting for our rights, Tuskegee Airmen. oh.